to separate the two worlds, and this is where they're going to focus in. Conceivably, crypto could eventually have its own ecosystem where it never touches fiat, I would imagine, at some point.
Well, as long as you have to pay your taxes in fiat, there's always going to be a need for that money supply. But yeah, that's correct. More and more commerce can be done in the digital spectrum. And this is already being the case in places like Africa, for example, Kenya, where they transact with M-Pesa, they transact with other digital currencies. And so we'll probably see more proliferation where rule of law currencies aren't quite stable.
Right, so it's almost like they're seceding from the fiat world. But I want to move on to Ethereum, because this is what we're here to talk about. So Ethereum, we broke Bitcoin on this show. We were first to talk about it really in the world. We talked about Litecoin. We were the first to talk about Litecoin. Now I want to be the very first to talk about Ethereum, because this is really a huge new chapter in the whole crypto story. So give a little brief on it, if you can.
Yeah, sure. So Ethereum is really just a continuation of the experiment of cryptocurrencies. And so if we go back to the history of Bitcoin, there was two things that they were testing. They were testing a blockchain, so this idea of a decentralized database that everybody has a copy of. And the second thing was a transaction system with these tokens that you could send around. So effectively it became email for money, and that's great. But then people said, well, we want all these other features. We want prediction markets, we want gambling, we want Wall Street, we want companies to live on a blockchain, we want law. And there was this endless amount of features that people could invent. So what we did at Ethereum is it's really a project of frustration. We took a step back and said, no features, let's have a featureless Turing-complete blockchain. And let's go ahead and build kind of like the Android of the cryptocurrency space to sit on top of it. And let's make everything one-click installation. Your wallet, one click, open transactions, one click, Ripple, one click, just go down the list. So that, in a nutshell, is basically Ethereum. It's this featureless thing where you can build your own features, you can build your own applications, and it kind of unifies the entire cryptocurrency space into one bucket.
So you've got the blockchain, which is kind of the genius of Bitcoin.
Exactly.
And you've got, it's used as a payment system, which is very fantastic,
it's an amazing
as you point out, every single transaction carries with it every transaction that's ever happened up until that point.
Right.
So you've got complete transparency. So what Ethereum says is that this blockchain can be used in another way.
In a more abstracted way. It can be used basically for anything. And I don't, as the designer, want to figure that out. Rather, what I'm going to do is give that to you. And I want to give that to everybody else in the ecosystem and say, you now have this beautiful foundation to build whatever you want to build on top of it.
Okay, here's the Thames River behind us.
Sure.
It's flowing through the city of London. There are now, that could be the blockchain, in other words. This is the base of the crypto Bitcoin universe. All along the Thames are different ways people are accessing the Thames. There's a wharf there, there's a boat, there are buildings, there's commerce being done. So Ethereum is kind of plugging into the flow that is Bitcoin, the phenomenon that is Bitcoin, and allowing folks to build all kinds of things that are, the word that came up when talking about Ethereum is efficiency.
Right.
So, and one of the ideas is that, I had this, we were talking earlier, all of the financial contracts in the world can be broken down into 60 contracts, if there's futures, options, brokerage.
Right.
So those 60 contracts, just talk a little bit about that, how that would work with Ethereum.
Oh, in terms of Willie Bromitz, he's done some great work. So if people go to projectactus.org, Willie's working with MIT, and actually it's 30 contracts. He took a look at everything, every financial relationship, and they're really like molecules in a sense. And you can actually break them down to more fundamental elements, these stated cash flows, basically. And so he looked at this and said, wow, this is really interesting. Can we actually try to replicate all of Wall Street from some base elements? And that's what Project Actus is doing. So what we're trying to do with Willie and trying to do with others is actually take those, import those, and actually run those on Ethereum. And the goal is to actually take Wall Street and put it on blockchain. But this time it's transparent, it's fair, and it's not too big to fail.
So here you have Bitcoin as currency, which is giving central bankers and bankers the jitters, making them quite nervous, rightfully so.
Right.
Here you have on Ethereum a way to take my correction, 30 essential contracts that encompass the universe of financialization. And you're giving anyone, anywhere, the ability to simply plug into using Ethereum on the blockchain and potentially take companies public, create futures contracts, create prediction markets, all for virtually no cost.
Exactly.
So everyone in that industry, Wall Street, City of London, is now, to use a word often uttered in the tech space, disintermediated, right? So they get kind of blown out in a sense.
They're new tools, and it depends on the existing incumbents to decide how they want to use these tools. But the point is that the tools we have today work for 2 billion people, and they work somewhat well. but they don't work for the whole world. And so the goal is, how do we build a tool set that's going to work for 7 billion people? And how do we build a tool set that's going to work fair for 7 billion people? So the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is it became the money of the internet. It's a fair money, no matter where you're at, it works the same. And the goal of Ethereum is kind of to become the internet of money. It's a whole bunch of different things, from contracts between people to contracts between properties, so we have smart property, to even organizations that can live on a blockchain. And you can build consensus engines, you can build reputation systems, you can do gambling, you can do whatever you want to do. Our job is to build the foundation. The world's job is to find what the applications are.
Okay, now one article suggests that Ethereum could replace or make obsolete Bitcoin.
No, we actually view Bitcoin to be kind of like gold, and Ethereum to be more like oil in terms of the economics and how we've designed the system. So Bitcoin makes a really good store of value. If you put your money into it, no matter when you put it in, over the long term, you've made a lot of money. And our hope is that's going to continue, especially because of the deflationary economic model. Ethereum is more like a gigantic computational engine where people build things on top and they use their computational engine to do things in a trustless way. And the fuel that runs that engine is Ether, the base unit of value in our ecosystem. So they have different use cases, and I think they actually can live in harmony. And that's actually why Roger Ver said in a recent video, hey, Bitcoin and Ethereum are great things to work together.
Okay, so they're complementary.
Exactly.
Okay, now you're a cryptographer. So before Bitcoin, there was something called cryptography.
Right.
And the Satoshi Nakamoto and the Bitcoin phenomenon is, cryptography, the way it works, it could be turned into a currency. Because the computing power necessary to solve computational problems for cryptography is setting up a situation where harnessing a network of folks together to do that. In other words, my question is, what was that light bulb moment? I think, and this would be interesting. There's cryptography. It existed before Bitcoin. What was Satoshi's insight? What was that light bulb moment? What exactly the transition from, cryptography to a currency model? If that's a legitimate question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, how would you describe that?
There's really two cryptographic primitives that are used in Bitcoin. One is a primitive used for consensus. So there's this idea of the blockchain where I put things into the blockchain and they don't come out. And it's trusted and secure across all parties. So you need a hashing algorithm to do that. We use SHA-256. Max Coin uses SHA-3, which is better. So there's...
Max Coin is better?
Well,
how so?
SHA-3 is great.
Because it's
a new cryptographic primitive. It uses a sponge construction. There's all this magic behind it. So I like SHA-3 more than SHA-256, but there's the debate.
There's no debate. Max Coin is better.
Yeah.
No, but I think before we're jumping ahead, I want to get back into the insight of of the cryptography. It's used for secure online transactions.
So there's two things, right? So the first is to make sure that the database is secure. So the ledger itself is secured by a mining process, and that mining process relies on a hash algorithm. The second thing is, how do you spend your money? Who gives you the right to do that? So it's called public key cryptography. In the particular case of a Bitcoin, it uses ECDSA, elliptic curve digital signing algorithm. And there's two parts: a public address that everybody in the world can know, and that's fine. And then there's a private key that only the person who has the right to spend the money has. So these two things put together actually allow you to create a completely decentralized and trustless currency.
Okay, would it be correct to say that the problem Bitcoin solves is double spending?
Yes, it solves double spending.
Okay, because before then, I could send somebody an electronic token, but I could conceivably do that and send it out to 10 people at the same time.
Right, because
and that's the problem.
You needed a central authority to maintain the database to inhibit double spending. But with the hashing algorithm, you actually have digital consensus in a decentralized way to prevent you from counterfeiting.
Right, so to verify...
So it creates digital scarcity, in a sense, which is the first time that's ever been done.
I'll talk a little bit more about that, a digital scarcity.
Yeah, so effectively, once you have a database that's secured by consensus, nobody in the ecosystem, nobody in the world can tamper with that unless they gain an overwhelming amount of hash power in the network. So effectively, when you have tokens that are in that database, those tokens are scarce. They can't be cloned or replicated. So just like gold, it has that property, and that's very unique. It's never been done before in a digital sense.
The tokens are the Bitcoins.
Exactly.
Right, so you're paying the people who are lending their CPU, their computers, to hash, and in exchange, they're getting a token.
Yeah.
Then those tokens, it just so happens, can be used now like money.
And that's why it was an experiment, because when it was first built, the tokens had no value. Then you could buy a pizza for 10,000 of them, and now a lot of people are millionaires as a result of the appreciation of value, because they're scarce.
Okay, right. And so scarcity, here's another description I would apply to a Bitcoin on the scarcity issue. In other words, you could say Bitcoin, the idea of a Bitcoin or the solutions to these cryptological problems have always existed since the beginning of time, but only in the last 5 years has there been enough computer power and the ability to network computers to actually go into the digital space and mine them. You could, like, for example, gold's been in the Earth's crust forever, but it took technology and capital to go mine the gold. The idea of turning a cryptological solution into a currency, it was kind of there since the beginning of time, you could say, because mathematics has been with us since the beginning of time.
Right.
But it was only in the last few years that you could harness together a network of computers, solve this problem, and get at this extremely scarce number, this precious number. And I call them precious numbers for this in this way, and a monetized precious number. Is that fair?
So,
or is that crazy? Or is that overly poetic?
You needed a lot of magic things to happen for Bitcoin to exist. You needed the guys in the 80s who were thinking about digital currencies to do their things. You needed Wei Dai to do his work with Crypto++. You needed Batum Back to go ahead and create Hashcash. And all of these things aggregated together at this beautiful paradigm-shifting focal point, which was Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper. And it was really the capstone. And we do this all the time in math. If you look at Andrew Wiles, when he solved Fermat's last theorem, it wasn't just Andrew Wiles. There was hundreds of people cited, because you needed all those mathematicians that came before to build something, some tool to give him. So Bitcoin is really the capstone of that. And Ethereum is the next step, our hope is. We're looking at everything that's been done in the Bitcoin ecosystem. We've looked at all the innovations, all the failures, and said, okay, now that we know these things, let's try to build another step. And then somebody's going to build another step after us. And
so the intrinsic value story for Bitcoin and Ethereum all comes back to scarcity.
Yeah, it comes back to scarcity in a sense, and it also comes back to the social network around the money. Money
right,
is
but
also
scarcity is something that very few people are talked about in a way that seems to resonate out there, because people just assume that digits are infinite. But they're not in this case, because these are solutions and numbers that require vast arrays of computers to solve for, translating into scarcity. But anyway, we've got to go. And I told you we'd be running out of time quickly, and we'd be all crying about it. But in fact, we're out of time, so I must say goodbye. But thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you so much, Max.
All right, super. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Charles Hoskinson of the Ethereum Project. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.